The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the glass doors of a small grocery store on the edge of town. Customers moved in and out as carts rolled softly across the floor. Among them was a quiet teenage girl in a wheelchair. Her movements were slow yet steady. She wore a worn hoodie. Her hair was loosely tied. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for a carton of milk. To most people she looked like any other shopper grabbing basic items. But to the cashier behind the counter she looked suspicious. "Hey," the cashier shouted suddenly. "What is that under your blanket?" The entire store went still. The girl's eyes widened in fear. "I didn't take anything," she said softly but urgently. The man rushed toward her pointing. "Don't lie. I saw you hiding something. People like you always try this." Customers began to stare. Some frowned. Others whispered. A mother pulled her child closer and turned away from the girl. The young shopper's face turned red. Her lips shook as she tried to explain. "I just dropped something. I didn't steal anything." Her voice cracked. The cashier ignored her. "Security," he shouted. "Call security now." From the back a guard appeared with his hand on the radio. The girl tried to push backward. Her wheelchair trembled. Tears filled her eyes. "Please. I didn't do anything wrong." Her words hung in the air. No one stepped forward. No one defended her. The cashier crossed his arms and stared at her with confidence. "We'll see what the cameras say." As the tension reached its peak, a calm, deep voice spoke from behind the crowd. "That's enough." The room turned. A tall, composed man stood a few steps away. It was Steven Seagal. His face was calm. His voice was controlled. The store fell into silence. What happened next left everyone stunned. The moment his voice cut through the noise, the entire store became quiet. All eyes fixed on the tall man at the end of the aisle. Broad shoulders. Steady stance. Clear authority. Steven Seagal was not there as a celebrity. He had been shopping quietly for daily needs. A cap was pulled low. Sunglasses rested on his collar. Most people had not recognized him. But when he spoke, his words carried weight. "That's enough," he said again as he walked closer. "You've said enough to this young lady." The cashier blinked. "This doesn't concern you. We caught her stealing. She's lucky we're not calling the police." Steven looked at the girl. She was shaking. Her hands gripped the wheelchair. Her face was pale. "Did you see her steal something?" Steven asked calmly. "Or are you assuming?" The cashier tightened his jaw. "I know what I saw. She hid something under that blanket." Steven lowered himself slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "Do you have anything you shouldn't?" She shook her head quickly. "No, sir. I dropped a snack and was picking it up." Steven turned back to the cashier. "You heard her. Maybe check the floor before accusing someone." The man scoffed. "I know a thief when I see one. Look at her. She expects sympathy." Several customers gasped. Tears rolled into the girl's eyes. Steven's jaw tightened. He stood fully facing the cashier. His voice was calm but firm. "Have you ever been judged before the truth came out?" The cashier hesitated. Steven stepped closer. "Then don't put someone else through it." The tension grew heavier. Even the guard stopped moving. The girl whispered, "Thank you." Steven nodded. "You did nothing wrong." The cashier snapped again. "I don't care who you are. I suspect her and that's policy." "Then check your cameras," Steven answered. "Let's see what actually happened." The cashier shifted. "They don't cover all angles." "Convenient," Steven said. "So you accuse a disabled girl without proof." Customers began murmuring. A woman spoke up. "She didn't take anything." Another said, "You can't treat people like that." The cashier shouted, "You don't know what you're talking about." Steven interrupted calmly. "People like what?" The man froze. Steven leaned forward slightly. "Choose your next words carefully." Silence filled the store. Steven turned to the girl. "Are you okay?" She nodded weakly. "I didn't think anyone would help me." Steven smiled slightly. "There are still good people left." The cashier tried to recover. "If she didn't steal then fine, but don't make me the villain." Steven shrugged. "You already handled that." Soft laughter moved through the crowd. The cashier snapped. "Who even are you?" Steven replied calmly. "Someone who doesn't like bullies." The cashier suddenly recognized him. "Wait, are you Steven Seagal?" Steven nodded slightly. "Yes, but that's not the point. What matters is how you treat people when you think no one is watching." The lesson settled over the room. The girl whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Seagal." "Call me Steven," he replied. "And keep your head up. You did nothing wrong." She nodded. "I won't forget this." Steven turned to the crowd. Strength is not about power. It's about doing what's right when others stay silent. If you saw someone being treated unfairly, would you step in or stay quiet? Share your thoughts below and tell us where you're watching from. As Steven moved back toward his cart, the tension eased, but the moment was not finished. The store manager had been watching from a distance. His face showed anger. What came next would change everything. "What's going on here?" a sharp voice asked. A tall man in a navy suit stepped forward. His name tag read Mr. Davis. The cashier stood upright immediately. "Sir, we had a theft situation, but this man interfered." Mr. Davis looked at Steven. "Interfered or stopped harassment?" Steven lifted an eyebrow. "Good question." Phones were now visible in the crowd. "No filming," the manager shouted. "You may want them filming," Steven said calmly. "It will help later." The manager turned to the girl. "What is your name?" "Lily," she whispered. "We need to check your belongings." "She said she took nothing," Steven replied. "Start with an apology." The manager crossed his arms. "This is a business, not a charity." Gasps filled the air. "You speak of rules as if decency doesn't matter," Steven said. "I've run this store 10 years, the manager snapped. "Then you've forgotten how to listen." Lily spoke again, trembling. "I only dropped a snack." The manager ordered the guard to search her bag. Steven stepped between them. "That's enough. You will not search her without consent." The manager sneered. "And what will you do?" "You don't want to find out," Steven said quietly. Suddenly a calm, powerful voice spoke from behind. "Is there a problem here?" A man in a gray suit approached holding a phone. "Dad," Lily whispered. Richard Hale introduced himself. The manager turned pale. The father kneeled beside Lily. "Are you okay?" "I am now." Richard turned to Steven. "Thank you." He then faced the manager coldly. "You're finished here." Security removed Mr. Davis as light applause filled the store. Steven shook Richard's hand. "Just pay it forward." As the crowd dispersed, Steven stood quietly. Some heroes wear badges. Others wear black belts. But true strength is standing for what's right. Richard later ordered full reports and mandatory training. He thanked Steven again. Lily admitted quietly that she is often judged for her wheelchair. Steven told her she is stronger than most people. She smiled at his words. Her father apologized. Steven said, "It's never too late to start changing things." Even the cashier apologized to Lily. She replied calmly, "It's not about who I am. It's about how you treat everyone." Richard's black sedan pulled up outside the store as the final moment settled in silence. The driver stepped out to open the door for Lily, but she paused and turned back toward Steven one last time. "Thank you for believing me," she said quietly. "No one ever does." Steven placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "That is how change begins, Lily. One person believing when others look away." She smiled through her tears and allowed her father to help her into the car. Before getting inside, Richard extended his hand once more. "If you ever need anything, a favor, a donation, a partnership, just ask. You have earned it." Steven gave a light chuckle. "Keep your money, Richard. Just make sure your daughter keeps that courage." Richard smiled. "You have my word." As the car pulled away, Steven stood at the edge of the parking lot watching it disappear into the orange glow of the sunset. The distant sound of traffic filled the air, and for a long moment he simply stood there thinking. A passerby recognized him and called out, "Hey Seagal, you still making movies?" Steven turned with a slight smile. "Still trying to make a difference," he replied. The man laughed, waved, and walked off. Steven looked back toward the store, now quiet, calm, and almost peaceful again. He drew a slow breath and murmured to himself, "Justice does not always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears patience." Then he turned, slipped his hands into his coat pockets, and walked down the street. Just another man blending into the evening, leaving behind a story that would soon travel far beyond the walls of that grocery store. Within hours, the video of the confrontation, filmed by several bystanders, reached social media. It spread rapidly online. "Steven Seagal stands up for Lily." Respect trended worldwide. Millions shared the footage, praising Steven's composure and Lily's bravery. The story became a symbol of compassion, integrity, and how a single act of courage can reach across the world. If you believe no one should be judged by how they look or what they have, type respect in the comments. And do not forget to subscribe for more inspiring real-life stories like this one. By the next morning, the video had already passed 12 million views. Clips of Steven Seagal calmly defending the young girl appeared everywhere. YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, even the evening news. Headlines filled the screens. Steven Seagal defends disabled girl from false theft claim. Real-life hero moment. Seagal protects paralyzed teen. A lesson in humanity. Seagal's viral stand against discrimination. The story affected people in ways no film ever could. Comment sections overflowed with support. Some called him a real-life action hero. Others wrote, "We need more people like Steven in this world." What touched Steven most were the quiet messages from parents, veterans, and people with disabilities who said his action gave them hope that kindness still existed. Later that night he sat alone in his modest home sipping tea and scrolling through the messages. His phone buzzed again. Another interview request. CNN, BBC, even morning talk shows wanted to feature him. He sighed and set the phone aside. "Not about fame," he muttered. "It is about the message." As he leaned back, his thoughts returned to Lily. He wondered how she was managing. That kind of attention could overwhelm anyone, especially a young girl already carrying so much. Just then his phone buzzed again, this time with a video call. It was Richard Hale. Steven answered with a small smile. "Mr. Hale." Richard grinned warmly. "Steven, please call me Richard. Lily has been wanting to see you again. Can you spare a few minutes?" Steven nodded. "Always." Moments later Lily appeared on the screen. Her smile was brighter and her energy lighter. She looked like a different person. "Hi, Mr. Seagal," she said with excitement. "Guess what? The mayor's office invited me to speak about accessibility and inclusion next week. Me on stage." Steven laughed softly. "That is amazing, Lily. You deserve it." Her eyes sparkled. "I could not have done it without you. What you did changed everything. People treat me differently now. Kinder, more respectful. Feels strange but good." Richard added, "You did not just protect my daughter, Steven. You gave her confidence back." Steven smiled gently. "I did not give her anything she did not already have. I just reminded people to see it." They spoke for a while about life, kindness, and how one moment can change hearts. When the call ended, Steven sat quietly, humbled. He had not expected gratitude. What he felt was peace. A few days later Steven was invited to an award ceremony organized by a local foundation for people with disabilities. Public appearances were no longer his preference, but something about this felt right. When he arrived, the crowd rose in applause. The host stepped forward smiling. "Tonight we celebrate not just a hero but a human being who reminded us what compassion truly looks like. Please welcome Mr. Steven Seagal." Steven stepped to the microphone, clearly moved by the response. He looked across the audience. Young and old. Wheelchairs, prosthetics, walking canes, and hopeful smiles. He took a steady breath. "I did not come here as a celebrity," he said. "I came as a man who saw something wrong and chose not to walk away. What happened that day was not about me. It was about every person who has been judged for how they look, what they wear, or what they cannot do." He paused and scanned the room. Real strength does not come from muscles or titles. It comes from the heart. And if each of us used even a little of it to protect someone else, this world would look very different. The audience rose to its feet, applauding with emotion. From the front row, Lily rolled forward, holding something small in her hand. She gave it to him. A gold pendant shaped like a lotus flower. "My mom used to say the lotus blooms in the mud," Lily said softly. "You reminded me that even in difficult moments good people can still rise." Steven's throat tightened. He took the pendant, nodded with respect, and whispered, "Thank you, Lily." That night after the event, Steven stepped outside. City lights reflected across the water and the air carried a quiet chill. He slipped the pendant into his pocket and allowed himself a small smile. A journalist approached with a microphone. "Mr. Seagal, one question. Why do you think this story reached so many people?" Steven considered for a moment, then looked directly into the camera. "Because deep down we all want to believe humanity is still alive," he said. "And it is if we choose it." The reporter lowered the microphone, visibly moved. Steven nodded once, then walked into the night. The steady stride of a man who did not only face villains on screen but stood against injustice in real life. What did you think of this story? Would you have stood up like Steven did, even with the world watching? Share your thoughts in the comments and type "stand up" if you believe kindness is the strongest form of power. Days turned into weeks and the world continued to talk about the video. Clips of Steven Seagal standing up for Lily moved beyond viral. They became a movement. Schools used it in ethics classes. Charities played it at fundraising events. Even police departments quietly added it to diversity training. But the most unexpected result was still to come. One morning Steven's assistant handed him a letter that had arrived at his door. No return name, just shaky handwriting. He opened it slowly. "Dear Mr. Seagal, I was the security guard in that grocery store. I froze when I should have spoken. I should have done what you did. I have replayed that moment countless times. You showed me what real courage looks like. Not fists or fame, but standing your ground when it matters. Thank you for reminding me of the man I want to be. David Collins." Steven folded the letter and set it gently on his desk. A faint smile formed. Sometimes redemption did not need an audience. Later that week, Steven received a call from the local police chief. "Mr. Seagal, we would like to invite you to speak at our annual integrity conference. Many of our younger officers look up to you not for your films but for what you did that day." Steven paused. Speaking publicly was not his focus, but this felt meaningful. "All right," he said finally. "But I am not coming to lecture. I am coming to remind." The auditorium was full. Officers, cadets, and journalists filled the seats. As Steven walked on stage, there were no dramatic lights or grand entrances. Only quiet respect. He took the microphone and looked across the room. "I am not here as an actor," he began. "I am here as a witness. I saw a young girl humiliated for no reason. I saw silence where there should have been courage. And I saw what happens when one voice chooses to speak." He let the moment settle. "Power is not about authority," he continued. "It is about responsibility. If you wear a badge, a uniform, or hold influence, you have the power to lift people up or tear them down. That is your choice." The room remained completely silent. Steven looked around. Courage is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is choosing decency when no one is clapping. Remember that. As he stepped away, the audience rose in sustained applause. Some officers wiped their eyes while others stood in salute. After the event, a man in plain clothes approached. Steven recognized him immediately. Mr. Davis, the store manager who had accused Lily. He looked thinner, older, and tired, but his eyes carried humility. "Mr. Seagal," he said quietly, "I do not expect forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you." Steven studied him. "For what?" "For not shaming me the way I shamed her," Davis replied. "You could have ruined my reputation. Instead, you let me face the truth myself. I lost my job, but I gained perspective. I now volunteer at a disability outreach center. It is the least I can do." Steven nodded slowly. "That's a start." We all paused. Davis said, "What matters is what we do next." The man looked down, emotion heavy in his voice. "You taught me more in 5 minutes than I learned in 10 years running that store." Steven gave a faint smile. "Then maybe it was not a waste." Davis reached out his hand. Steven shook it with confidence. "No grudges. No words left unsaid. Everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone takes responsibility. Do you believe people like Mr. Davis deserve another chance? Comment below and share what you would have done in his place." A week later, Steven visited a community center downtown. It was the one Mr. Davis had talked about. Near the entrance sat Lily. She was helping young kids in wheelchairs paint small canvases. She noticed Steven right away. "Hey, you came," she said while waving with excitement. He smiled and crouched beside her. "I could not stay away. You turned this place into something special." She laughed. "It is not me. It is all of us." Donations had started after the video. "We now have art supplies, ramps, new chairs, everything." Steven's expression softened. "You started a movement, Lily. That is real strength." She smiled proudly. "You showed me how." The room filled with laughter, conversation, and the sound of brushes moving across paper. For the first time, Steven allowed himself to relax and exist in a space filled with kindness instead of conflict. As he watched Lily give a paintbrush to a younger child, he realized something powerful. Sometimes the greatest victories do not happen in the spotlight. They happen quietly in the lives you change. That night, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Steven walked along the boardwalk. The ocean breeze brushed against his jacket. He took the lotus pendant Lily had given him from his pocket and held it against the fading light. It shimmered. Simple, beautiful, resilient. He smiled and whispered, "The world still has good people in it. We just need to remind them." Then he placed the pendant back in his pocket and continued walking. The waves echoed behind him. A man at peace. No cameras. No applause. Just a quiet hero who turned one brave act into a wave of compassion the whole world could feel. If this story moved you, type humanity in the comments, because the world does not need more heroes. It just needs more people who care. Months passed after the grocery store incident that shook the internet. For Steven Seagal, life slowly returned to something close to normal. Morning walks. Guitar practice. A few film meetings from time to time. But something inside him had changed. He was no longer chasing roles that pushed violence. He was searching for stories that mattered. Stories that could move people the way Lily moved him. One evening, Steven sat in his study with a warm amber lamp lighting his desk. Stacks of letters were spread before him. Messages from fans, students, and even police officers. Some were long. Some were short. But they all shared one idea. "Thank you for reminding us what decency looks like." He picked up a letter from a woman in Scotland. "My son has cerebral palsy. After watching your video he told me he wants to stand up for others like you did. He is only 8. You gave him confidence, Mr. Seagal. Steven leaned back and exhaled slowly. Sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest echoes, he thought. The next day he was invited on a national talk show. The host introduced him as the man who made the world believe in humanity again. Steven chuckled. I do not know about that, but I will take it. The host leaned forward. Millions watched that video. Many say it changed how they see courage. When you look back, what did it all mean to you? Steven paused and chose his words carefully. It reminded me that being human is not about being perfect. It is about doing the right thing when it is difficult. I did not act to be seen. I acted because someone had to. And the truth is, anyone could have done it. The audience went silent. Not from discomfort but from truth. He continued. We live in a world where it is easy to record wrong but hard to correct it. That day showed that kindness still has a place in all this noise. The host nodded with emotion. So what would you say to the people watching now? Steven smiled. Next time you see something wrong, do not wait for a hero. Be one. A week later the city held a charity event in Lily's honor. It was called the Stand Up Project. The movement supports children with disabilities who face public shame or discrimination. The hall was filled with photos of children learning, painting, smiling. The air was full of positivity and laughter. Lily stood at the stage in a bright blue dress, her smile glowing. She took a breath and said, When I met Mr. Seagal, I thought he was just a movie star. But he became something more. Proof that some people do not just talk about kindness. They live it. The crowd applauded, many with tears in their eyes. She continued, That day I felt small and powerless. But his one action made me believe I mattered. And now I want every kid here to know you matter too. Steven watched from the back of the hall, quietly proud. He did not want attention. This was her story now. As she finished, the crowd stood in applause. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed. But Steven slipped away unnoticed with a quiet smile. Later that night Steven returned to the boardwalk. The same place he walked months earlier after it all began. City lights shimmered across the water. The air was calm and cool. He sat on a bench facing the sea. A young man approached in his early 20s wearing a police cadet uniform. Excuse me, sir. Are you Steven Seagal? Steven smiled. Depends who is asking. The young man smiled nervously. I joined the academy because of that video. I used to think being tough meant not caring. Now I know being strong means protecting people. All people. Steven nodded softly. That is the kind of strength the world needs more of. The cadet thanked him and walked away. Steven turned back to the ocean. The waves mixed with distant city sounds. Chaos behind. Calm ahead. Real strength is not loud. It is steady and kind. Do you agree? Type real strength in the comments if you believe compassion is the greatest power. Weeks later, a documentary filmmaker approached Steven with the idea of turning the viral moment into a short film. Not to praise him but to spread the message. Steven agreed on one condition. Make Lily the focus. Her courage deserves the spotlight more than mine. The film was released under the title The Day Kindness Spoke. It gained millions of views and started real conversations. Schools discussed it. Companies used it for ethics training. Families watched it together. In one scene, Lily's voice said, He did not just defend me. He reminded the world that kindness does not need permission. That line stayed with people. It became a quote shared online, placed on posters, and even tattooed by a few fans. As time passed, Steven mentored young filmmakers, officers, and activists. He refused awards and redirected all praise to the Stand Up Project. He knew the real reward was not trophies or headlines. It was the change. People were beginning to speak up again. Humanity was rising in its purest form. One evening, Lily visited Steven with a small gift. A framed photo of the community center filled with smiling kids. At the bottom she wrote in her careful handwriting, For the man who turned one act of courage into 1,000. Steven studied the photo for a long moment. You know, Lily, he said softly, I think you have done more for the world than I ever could. She laughed. Maybe. But I learned from the best. They both smiled. No extra words needed. As night settled, Steven stood by his window watching the city lights in the distance. He whispered quietly, If even one person chooses kindness tomorrow, then it was all worth it. He turned off the light and the room fell into calm silence. Some heroes wear capes. Others wear humility. Steven Seagal wore both, not on his shoulders but in his heart. If this story inspired you, do not just scroll. Share it. Somewhere someone is waiting for a reason to believe in goodness again. And maybe that reason is you.